CD.
That's great. John, the only request I would make is you slide back a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Your colleague here
Sure.
can be in the circle. Terrell.
You're conveniently next.
Oh, great. What am I saying?
Introducing
Introduction.
yourself and your
Okay.
first album that you purchased.
Ah, jeez,
First
that's
piece of
right.
music. With your own money.
Sorry.
Music.
With my own money. So
Right.
Tramell Turner, LT17. I work at Nintendo as my day job. I also own Poco Wine and Spirits in Capitol Hill. And happy that you're able to make this time with us.
Thank you.
And thanks to Daphne and Nancy for helping us so much. My first piece of music that I purchased myself, I think, this is a horrible album. I don't recommend that at the age that I purchased it, that you ever let your children get their hands on something like it. But it was Ice-T's Cold as Ice, which had I'm Your Pusher.
I'm Your Pusher?
Yeah.
Pusher Man?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, all right.
It's better than Pump Up the Jam.
Yeah, pretty bad.
Yeah, that's pretty horrible. I feel much better about
Good
Ice-T
lesson
right
in
now.
one-hit wonders.
Plus, Ice-T is like a cultural icon.
Totally.
Now,
Right.
right?
Timothy Miller. My career's been focused in design and experience design, and I have a consultancy called Thoughtful Design, and so we partner in that, and we focus on companies really trying to understand how to bring better experiences to their products and services. I also am the head of design of a company called Blockable. We do, it's basically modular construction product with the goal of basically providing housing for everyone. So it's just sort of altruistic, but also not. It's based on intramodal system, but not containers. Yep. We're actually working with the city on a couple interesting projects as well currently now. First music was U2's Under a Blood Red Sky album, and Slash Boy, I think was actually at the time. So that was my. I couldn't remember if it was that or In Excess, but it was. I'm pretty sure it was the U2 album.
I think that's a better choice.
Yeah. So that's me.
Hi, Tony. I'm David Barnes, and I work at the City of Kirkland. I'm a land use planner, focuses on policy, livable and sustainable communities. I have a passion for that, so I'm really excited to be working in that area. Okay, you guys ready? Take it to the limit. Eagles, 45 vinyl.
Wow.
And I couldn't afford an album, and in those days they didn't release albums necessarily first or whatever. They would tease you with
It was whatever was
"Here's
on the
a
radio,
45,
right?
and
Yeah.
This is on. I don't know what's on the B side, but take it to the limit.
Wow.
So,
That's a good one.
yep.
I'm Kate Thorson. I work at Camber Collective, which is a management strategy consultant for social impact organizations. My background specifically is in global health and development. And I know for sure my first CD that I bought was Michael Jackson. I don't remember which album, but
That's great. Are you working on our project, Kate?
no, I'm not actually, but my colleagues Jamie and Bethany are. Do you know them?
Yeah. Well, I would bet I call.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, my name is Nicole Bascom-Aaron. I am the Community Relations Administrator for Home Street Bank. And the first piece of music I bought was Ice-Cube's America's Most Wanted.
Oh, a little competition.
Yeah, that was a good
Just
Ice Cube
the commonalities in ice.
There were no
covered.
CDs when I was buying music.
I bought my first one was a tape as well.
Oh, definitely tape.
Well,
Yeah.
none of you reference Vanilla Ice.
I'm Kate Morrison. I'm the Executive Director of City Fruit. We are a local organization. We harvest fruit from residential properties and public parks and donate it to the emergency food system. And we also maintain fruit trees on public land throughout Seattle. My first album was Tori Amos' album that I purchased with my own money. I remember fighting with my father in media play about it because it's this album where she's holding a snake and he's like, how could you possibly want to buy this music? It's being re-released on vinyl next month, and I pre-ordered it. So it's 20 years old, which is really exciting.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, I'm Tony, and I can't remember which of the following was the first one, but I know they were the two first ones. One was Stone's Tattoo You. It was a cassette tape. I was a little older than some of you, if not all of you. And the other one was Billy Joel Glass Houses. less of a village elf fan over the years, but that was good. All right, let's dig in. What do you guys want to talk about?
Great. So we've kind of got some themes we'll go through here, and I'll start out maybe with the opening question, and folks can come in with some follow-ons. But first, we want to talk about your leadership journey, right? Leadership Tomorrow, we're going through that whole training as we're looking at different leadership styles out there. So with your leadership journey, what shaped you early on in life?
In life,
That then had an impact later on with where you are now.
yeah. You know, I think that the thing that's interesting about leadership is that there is some element of it that is nature and some element of it that is nurture. And the nature element, I think, will be elusive for forever. I'm not sure what makes it, but I feel like I was lucky enough to have just enough of that, such that the nurture element, which is so important, of being around great leaders. And from the professional context, you know, I was in the situation where out of college, at the suggestion of my father, who thought that it was time for me to, a few months after graduation, leave their apartment in New York City and find my own way, got my first job out of the New York Times, working for a big phone company selling business-to-business data communications products, which no one wanted to buy at the time. This was in the early 90s. And the manager of this team of about 20 people suddenly got fired, and our regional manager, about a year after I started, decided that I should lead the team. All of whom were older and more experienced than I was, and I had to take a deep breath and really consider how I would show up to them. And more based upon just fear and insecurity than any thoughtfulness or cleverness on my part, I sat them down and I said, I'm scared and insecure. And you are all more tenured than I am. Many of you I have learned immense things from over the last year. So what I would like to do is figure out a way to be effective as a leader for you, but I need you to help me with how I do that. I need you to really have a relationship with me where it's not a boss-employee thing, but I'm playing this role on our team. And I think that the big lesson for me in that, which I'd learned in earlier stages of my life from people I respected as leaders and other experiences I'd had, was this theme of authenticity and sincerity in being able to simultaneously have a position of accountability and authority, but to not put on a facade and not to attempt to pretend to be something that you are not. And that general theme, in which I'll kind of build on as we talk more, has been a hallmark of mentors that I've learned the most from, and also of whatever success I think I have had as a leader. When I to then juxtapose that to years later at Microsoft, which has this sort of semi-secret thing called Partner, which is about the senior-most 1% of the company. When you go through a program where they are essentially assessing whether you will be a future leader at that level of seniority, at the end of that program, it used to be called the bench program, you receive, if you've been successful in it, a little plaque, and on the plaques are the Latin words sine and sera, and with it comes a story that is the derivation of that phrase. That was about basically artisans in ancient Rome who made these incredible statues you see in the greatest museums in the world out of marble. And they used to fill in the cracks of the statues with wax. And the purpose was that if you stood back from them, it looked like the statue was flawless. And there was a new school of artisans who decided actually the cracks are part of the beauty and the art of the object. And they began doing it without using wax, or sine cera, without wax, which is the derivation of the word sincere. So my early experiences and then throughout my career just continue to put an exclamation point on this very hard to find place of being the leader, showing confidence, direction, but also being human enough to be self-aware and have people help you. It is a servant leader principle.
When you were young, did you have something you dreamed of doing when you were a kid?
I actually thought that I liked the idea of being an architect, but I had none of the core skills to be a good architect. When you're young and you decide, I'm going to be this thing, and then you realize you just and I think that I thought that was a fascinating prospect because the concept of building things was something that was exciting to me. And I then found that my first job out of the New York Times was actually more born of my obsession with Star Trek and the ability to play with gadgets and communications devices than anything else. But I did also feel like there's some element of service that I wanted to explore. I was in Army ROTC in college. I got into the John Jay School of Criminal Justice after college, learned that I was either going to be a lawyer or a cop, and that I didn't want to be either a lawyer or a cop. So I was continuously hitting up against this, I want to be of service in some way, and then went through a 22-year respite from that in the high-tech industry, which the spirit of it continued to come up, and that's why about midway through that I started doing more and more things in terms of community impact and involvement. But yeah, for some reason I thought I would be a great architect.
So you've mentioned the servant leadership model a few times. Is that something that you read about in books, or was it something you witnessed and learned that you could then model in your career and your leadership?
In my life experiences, I saw great examples of you just know someone who is a leader who is thinking about the mission and those next to them. You can just tell. You see it in how you can't pretend it. You actually have to have it internalized. You have to say, I am here to serve us and to serve where we are going. And you see it in little things they do. You also see the opposite. You can learn as much from bad leadership as you can from good leadership. I had an experience with one particular leader who will remain nameless, where we would have large meetings in windowless conference rooms until all hours of the night with 80 people, and when it was time for, say, for example, us to all eat, there'd be a buffet set up outside the conference room, and this particular leader had his food brought into him. And you kind of, I learned from my experience earlier that the troops eat first, always. And you can see leaders who show up that way. They just instinctively look after the people around them first. There's another great leader I used to work with on the opposite side of the spectrum, incredible leader, who I would notice he grew up, he only had 2 jobs in his life. One was at Microsoft, and the other was working in his family's Italian restaurant when he was younger. And so he would walk around the hallways, and if he saw a piece of paper or like a paper towel lying on the ground, he'd pick it up. I mean, the guy had 20,000 people working for him. He'd pick it up and go find the garbage can and put it down, because his attitude was, this is our place. I'm not above stooping down and picking up a piece of garbage because I'm of service to this place and the people in it. So yeah, lots of, as many examples of great servant leaders where you can just trust your instincts. I mean, one of the things I'll just throw out is one of my greatest, I kind of call it a mistake, but I'm maybe being too hard on myself, lessons in my career, was that it took me a while to really trust my instincts. There were lots of opportunities I had when I was more junior in my career to be in rooms full of incredibly accomplished people, some of whom, name brand titans of industry. And I would oftentimes, because of the nature of my career path and my job, would be the most junior person in the room. And they would be convinced of something, in violent agreement about a certain strategy or a certain path forward. And there was something in me that would say, I don't think that's right. I think that may be like a really bad mistake. But I wouldn't speak up because I had imposter dilemma. I had insecurity that I didn't know as much as them. I'm not as smart as them. I'm not a fraction as accomplished as they are. And then I found that I did that a few times and saw that the net result was I actually was right. And I had done such a disservice to my organization by not having the courage to productively, in a substantiated, thoughtful way, speak up. That I just throw that out for people at this formative stage of your career development. Don't err on the side of keeping your mouth shut around leadership, around strategy, etc.
How do you encourage that as a leader now to make sure that your people in your organization do have the opportunity and sort of temerity to come forward with those comments?
When I was in my high-tech career, I scored really high, especially towards the end of my career, on leadership excellence. So in the organizations that I ran and the way that leaders were held accountable in my company, you'd have employees surveys, not unusual. I think you guys probably have it in some of your companies. Employee surveys on what is their feedback, not only on the environment, but for a certain level of leader, specifically on that leader. Does this vice president create an atmosphere where cross-group collaboration happens effectively between teams? Does this vice president value diversity and inclusiveness in his or her blah, blah, blah? And I achieved really high scores on that, and one of them was about openness and all that. And then I came here, and it was very different because people wouldn't speak up. And I realized that I had we had an atmosphere that we were evolving from that was very hierarchical, and people felt like it wasn't their place to say certain things at certain times. It was not an atmosphere where one of our junior program officers felt like they could come into my office and tell me what I just said in that speech was really incorrect or created a negative impact. So the thing that I would say is to hear what I've realized. For a while I thought they were afraid of me because they thought that based upon what they thought my professional profile was, that I was just going to start taking heads off and knocking skulls and doing all of that, which I don't do. That's not the type of manager I was. But they still seemed afraid of me and afraid of speaking up. And then I started to realize that there were a few that broke through and were brave. We've been going through major evolutions here, and one of the ones that really helped me learn about myself is a guy who was an advisor we have a philanthropic advisor here, and I asked him, what do you think about the strategy I was trying to drive? And I thought maybe he might talk to me. We were out at lunch waiting for some people. And he said, I completely agree with it. It's extremely exciting, and I'm terrified I'm not up to it. And what I suddenly realized was people weren't being open because they were afraid of me. They were being, in that way, they weren't being open because they were concerned they might expose to me some degree of ineptitude or inability to meet the challenge. And that made me realize I had to take a whole different orientation on it. I want people to be open, so I will very rarely make that a negative experience for someone unless they say something that is culturally unproductive, and then I have to teach a lesson to people, which is a tough one.
Someone want to follow on that?
I would, because I'm extremely curious about we all living in this area hear a lot about Microsoft, and you yourself as a former Microsoft vice president, one of the things you just sort of explicitly pointed out is I'm not that type of leader. And I do wonder, if you look from the perspective of a servant leader or a person who aspires to be that, how were you able to find success in that context? And I would assume be seen as someone who was a viable asset within what we perceive to be the Microsoft culture.
If I had followed the pattern, Camille, of what I was supposed to do in terms of some of the behaviors that I actually didn't agree with, I might have been a more senior vice president. And especially when we had our stack ranking system, which Satya has now changed, there were definitely occasions where I had gained enough courage as a leader to say, I will not do that. It is counter to the best interest of the company in this way. It culturally, in terms of the people's perception of how we were performance managing them, but also just in terms of our institutional muscle. And putting my badge down and people knowing that I had the courage of my convictions and was prepared to sacrifice further professional advancement by just doing what the system was telling me to do, was a courage building experience for me. But it was also one where my team knew that's the type of person I was, not because I'm just a wonderful person, but because I just knew that taking a different path would eat me up inside. Just the toxicity of not standing up for what you believe. And what I've come to understand is those decisions are binary. I mean, you're all going to be in situations as leaders in your life where the culture, the system that you are trying to promote is going to press on your value system and your integrity. And my guidance to you is stand by what you believe is right. Be a productive, vocal person about it, so don't just be a glass breaker. And if they take you out, you don't want to be there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
So, in that situation, or maybe other situations where you've been in like that, who do you look to as your sounding board, or your own personal support network when you're putting yourself out there on something that you feel really strongly about, but that it's not going to be popular? Who are the people that you're either looking to for advice, mentors, or colleagues, or friends, or family that you can, kind of think that through with, and who support you to stay true to the most important values in life?
Pretty much the only thing that I did in a very planful way for my career was build mentors. I don't know why I was smart enough to be really focused about it, but against a backdrop of many mistakes, that was one where I kept in touch with people throughout my career who had taught me great lessons, who were in that category of great leaders that I respected. And by cultivating that network, I still have. I mean, there are 15 or 20 incredible leaders that I've known through my career who I spoke to one of them just yesterday, who I can call on at any time with a challenge that I may have. And they provide the wisdom of their own experiences. So in this example I just gave, where in a culture that was difficult to show up as an authentic servant leader in some ways, I called on my bosses, and the words I just used were actually a quote from one of them, who said, if you believe that you are right and you are doing what is in the best interest of the company, remember that's the principle, the best interest of the organization. It's not solely just the best interest of a person or people. That's clearly a very important principle, that you work for an organization that has a mission, that has accountabilities, and that doesn't always correlate. If it's in the best interest of the company, stand by it, and as he said, if they take you out, it's binary. You don't want to work there. I mean, I literally quoted one of my mentors before even telling you I was quoting that person because of the importance of that network. It's a tricky thing because people who you want as mentors, lots of people want as mentors. And the thing that I also think was helpful for them was I always tried to identify what about that relationship would be of value to them. You know, I had one mentor who the only reason he spent time with me, other than he liked me, but he could have spent his time doing a lot of other things, was he wanted the dirt on what was going on. I knew he wanted the dirt. I mean, we'd have half of our mentoring meeting would be like, you know, not in an inappropriate or way that violated confidentiality, but I'd give him the dirt because he was hungry for it. And his view was, I'm going to meet with Mestris because he wants some advice on stuff, but then I'm going to find out what's going on. Yeah, find out what's valuable to them.
Can you tell us anything about